He wasn't supposed to stop that night. Not on that road. Not in that kind of rain where the sky doesn't fall in drops, but in sheets, thick and relentless, like something trying to race the world 1 mile at a time. And yet the moment his headlights cut through the storm and caught that small trembling shape at the edge of the asphalt, something inside him broke formation. Something older than training, deeper than instinct. And he hit the brakes harder than he meant to, tires whispering against the slick pavement as the truck came to a halt in the middle of nowhere, engine idling, wipers fighting a losing battle against the downpour. And for a second, he just sat there, hands tight on the wheel, breath slow and controlled like it always was, like it had to be, because stopping meant remembering. And remembering was the one thing Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole had spent the last 8 months learning how not to do. But the shape didn't move, it didn't run, didn't flinch, just stayed. There under the weak spill of his headlights, small, soaked, barely more than a shadow with eyes that caught the light and held it. And that was wrong because stray dogs run, they scatter, they disappear into the dark, but this one stayed, as if it had been waiting, not for just anyone, but for him. And Ethan exhaled slowly, jaw tightening as he reached for the door handle, the cold rain hitting him instantly the moment he stepped out, soaking through his jacket in seconds, the kind of cold that seeps in a bone. But he didn't stop, didn't hesitate, boots splashing through shallow puddles as he moved closer, closer until the shape sharpened into something real, something fragile. A German Shepherd puppy, no more than a few months old, ribs faintly visible beneath wet fur, legs shaking under its own weight, ears not fully standing yet. And still it didn't back away, didn't bark, didn't cry out loud the way a frightened animal should. Just a soft, broken sound in its throat, barely audible over the rain, like it had already used up most of its strength just staying alive long enough to be seen. And Ethan felt that sound more than he heard it, felt it somewhere behind his ribs where things hadn't felt right in a long time. And he crouched slowly, one knee sinking into the cold mud, his breath visible in the damp air. Easy, he murmured, voice low, steady, the way you speak to something that might break if you say the wrong thing. And the puppy's eyes stayed locked on his, not wild, not afraid, just searching. And that was what made his chest tighten, because he had seen that look before, not in a dog, but in a man a long time ago. On a night he didn't talk about, a night that still came back in pieces when the world got too quiet. And for a moment his hand hovered in the air between them, suspended, uncertain, like crossing that distance meant more than just touching a stray animal, like it meant stepping back into something he had walked away from. And the rain kept falling, harder now, drumming against the road, against the hood of his truck, against his shoulders, and still the puppy didn't move, just watched him, waiting. And then, slowly it took one step. Forward, then another, each movement unsteady but deliberate, until it closed that distance itself and pressed its small, trembling body against his hand. And the contact was warm despite the cold, real in a way that cut through everything else. And Ethan inhaled sharply, something shifting behind his eyes as his fingers curled instinctively into the wet fur, steadying the tiny body as it leaned into him like it had already decided he was the one, like there had never been another option. And that was the moment he noticed it, not the dog, but what hung loosely from its neck, half hidden beneath the soaked fur, a thin, worn strip of fabric tied crudely, holding something metallic that caught the light just enough to glint through the rain. And Ethan's breath caught without warning, his hand freezing where it was as the sound of the storm seemed to dull around him, because he knew that shape, knew it before he even reached for it, fingers brushing against cold metal as he pulled it. Free just enough to see the edges, the unmistakable outline of a dog tag, worn, scratched, older than it should have been, and his pulse thudded once, heavy, deliberate, as if the world itself had paused to see what he would do next. And for the first time since he stepped out of that truck, the rain didn't feel like rain anymore. It felt like something else, something heavier, something that carried memory with it. And Ethan swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the tag, not reading it yet. Not ready, because some names don't stay in the past no matter how far you drive, and some stories don't end just because you survive them. And the puppy, still pressed against his hand, let out that same soft sound. Again, quieter now, almost like a whisper, as if it knew exactly what it had just placed back into his life. Before we begin, tell me, we're witching from Drop Your Country in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story travels the metal, is colder than the rain, colder than his fingers expect. And for a moment, Ethan does not move, does not breathe, because there are things a man can carry across oceans and years without ever setting them down. And there are things he buries so deep he almost believes they are gone. But this is neither. This is something that was never supposed to find him again. Not out here on a forgotten stretch of road where even the streetlights gave up miles back. And yet it is in his hand now, small and unassuming, a piece of stamped steel that should not matter anymore, except it does. It always did. And the puppy shifts closer, pressing its soaked body against his wrist as if steadying him, as if sensing the way his pulse has changed, heavier now, uneven, like footsteps returning to a place he swore he would never walk again. And he exhales slowly, forcing his fingers to close around the tag, turning it just enough for the faint light from his truck to catch the surface, rainwater sliding across the engraved letters, blurring them for a second before they sharpen into something undeniable, something that hits harder than the cold, harder than the memory he has spent months outrunning. And he shuts his eyes, not because he cannot see it, but because he already has, because some names do not need to be read twice. They live in the marrow, etched deeper than any metal could hold. And for a second the road disappears, the rain fades, and he is somewhere else entirely, somewhere hot and dry where the air carried dust instead of water, and the nights were too quiet until they were not. And there had been a man standing beside him then, laughing at something small, something unimportant, the kind of moment that never feels like it will be the last until it is, and Ethan swallows hard, forcing the image away before it can settle, before it can take shape, because he knows where that path leads, and he has walked it too many times already. But the present does not let him go that easily. The puppy shifting again, letting out a faint whine that pulls him back, grounding him in the cold, in the rain, in the weight of something very real pressed against his palm. And he opens his eyes again, slower this time, looking not just at the tag, but at the way it is tied, the frayed strip of fabric, not military issue, not standard, something improvised, something personal. And that detail lands differently, quieter but sharper, because it means this was not lost by accident. It was kept, carried, passed on, and the thought settles into him with a weight he cannot ignore. And he glances down at the puppy again, really looks this time at the way it holds itself despite the shaking, the way its eyes stay fixed on him with something that feels too deliberate for something so small. And he shakes his head once, almost under his breath, as if denying the idea before it can fully form, because dogs do not plan, they do not choose like that. They survive, they react. And yet this one did not run, did not hide. It waited, and that word sits wrong in his chest, heavy and persistent, and he shifts his stance, glancing back toward the empty road behind him. Nothing but darkness stretching out in both directions. No houses, no lights, no sign of where this animal could have come from. And that absence speaks louder than anything else, because nothing lives out here without a reason, and nothing survives a storm like this alone. And Ethan feels the question rise before he can stop it, quiet but insistent. Where did you come from? And the puppy responds not with sound but with movement, pulling slightly away from him, just enough to turn its head toward the tree line beyond the shoulder of the road, a dark wall of wet branches and shadow where the rain seems to fall even heavier. And it looks back at him once, then again toward the trees, a small motion, subtle, but unmistakable, and Ethan's jaw tightens as he follows the direction of its gaze, eyes narrowing slightly, as if trying to see through the darkness, through the layers of rain that distort everything just beyond reach. And for a moment, he says nothing does. Nothing, just stands there with the tag still in his hand and the weight of a choice settling over him. Because he knows that step, knows what it means to follow something into the unknown, knows how easily one decision can become something that does not let you go. And he had promised himself quietly, without words, that he was done with that, done chasing ghosts, done answering calls that came from places no one else could see. But the puppy shifts again, taking a small, unsteady step toward the trees, then pausing, looking back at him with that same steady gaze, not pleading, not afraid, just waiting. And that is what breaks the stillness, not the rain, not the memory, but the patience in something that should not have any reason to trust him at all. And Ethan exhales slowly, a breath that carries more than just the cold with it. And he closes his hand around the dog tag once more before slipping it carefully into his pocket, the metal pressing faintly against his chest as he straightens, eyes lifting toward the dark line of trees. And for the first time since he stepped out of the truck, the road behind him feels farther away than the unknown ahead, and that thought settles into something quiet but certain as he moves forward, one step off the asphalt and into the wet grass, following a path he cannot yet see, guided by something he does not fully understand. And the puppy does not hesitate this time, turning immediately and leading the way into the rain, as if it already knows exactly where this night is going to take them. The grass gives way under his boots with a soft, sucking sound, each step pulling him farther from the safety of the road and deeper into something that feels older than the storm itself. The rain threading through the branches above in uneven patterns, tapping against leaves, dripping down the back of his neck, soaking everything it touches until there is no dry place left. And still the puppy moves ahead of him with a certainty that does not belong to something so small, weaving through the undergrowth without hesitation, its slight body barely visible between shadows, only the occasional flicker of movement and those steady amber eyes. When it glances back to make sure he is still there, and Ethan follows, not because he has decided to, but because stopping now would feel wrong in a way he cannot explain, like turning his back on something that has already chosen him whether he agrees or not. And the forest closes in around them quickly, the road disappearing behind a curtain of wet branches and darkness until it might as well have never existed at all. And the air changes here, heavier, quieter, carrying a different kind of sound beneath the rain, something faint and uneven that Ethan does not notice at first because his focus is still on the puppy, on the strange, deliberate way it navigates the terrain, avoiding fallen limbs, stepping around shallow dips in the ground, as if it has walked this path before. And that thought lingers just long enough to make him uneasy, because it should not be possible, not for a stray, not for something that should have been lost. And yet there is no hesitation in its movement, no uncertainty, only purpose, and that word settles deeper this time, heavier, as if it has been waiting for him to understand it. And then he hears it, not with his ears at first, but with that same instinct that made him stop on the road, a shift in the rhythm of the night, a break in the steady pattern of rain against leaves, something softer, irregular, almost like breathing, and he slows without meaning to, head tilting slightly as he tries to isolate the sound. And the puppy stops too, just ahead of him, turning back with a stillness that feels intentional, watching him as if gauging whether he has caught up to something it already knows. And Ethan takes another step forward, slower now, more careful, his senses sharpening in a way they have not in months. Every small noise separating itself from the storm, the drip of water from branch to branch, the distant rustle of wind pushing through the trees, and beneath it all that faint, uneven sound again, closer now, just beyond the next cluster of brush, and his chest tightens without warning, not from fear, but from recognition. Because there is something about that sound that does not belong to the forest, something that carries a weight he has learned to recognize even when he wishes he had not. And the puppy turns again, moving toward it without hesitation, slipping through a narrow gap between two low-hanging branches, disappearing for a second before reappearing on the other side. And Ethan follows, pushing the branches aside as he steps through, the leaves brushing against his shoulders, cold and slick. And when he clears them, the space opens just enough for him to see it, not clearly, not all at once, but in pieces, a shape against the darker ground, partially hidden by shadow and rain. Something still, too still for this kind of night. And he stops, breath catching slightly as the world seems to narrow around that single point, his focus locking onto it, even as his mind resists what it might mean. And the puppy moves toward it slowly now, no longer leading with urgency, but with something quieter, something careful, as if approaching something fragile. And that change in its movement sends a ripple through Ethan's chest because it mirrors something he recognizes, something he has done before in places far from here, approaching not danger, not exactly, but something that mattered enough to be treated gently, and he steps closer, one careful step at a time. The ground softer here, the mud deeper, his boots sinking slightly with each movement. And the sound becomes clearer now, unmistakable, a weak, uneven breath that does not belong to the wind or the rain, and Ethan exhales slowly, the air leaving his lungs in a controlled release as his eyes adjust to the dim light, tracing the outline of what lies ahead, the curve of a body, the faint rise and fall that confirms what he is hearing, and something inside him shifts again, not sharp this time, not sudden, but deep like a door opening in a place he had sealed shut. And he does not realize he has spoken until the words are already out, low and steady, barely louder than the rain. Easy now, we are right here, and the puppy reaches the shape first, pressing itself close, letting out a soft sound that is almost a call, almost a reassurance, and the shape responds. Not with movement at first, but with a slight change in that fragile rhythm, a breath that comes a little deeper, a little more aware, and Ethan feels it in his chest before he fully understands what it means, before he sees clearly what is lying there waiting in the dark. And when he finally steps close enough for the faint light filtering through the storm to reveal it, his hand tightens instinctively at his side, not in fear, not in hesitation, but in recognition of something that has already begun to change him, because this was never just about the puppy. And whatever waits in front of him now is the reason it did not run, the reason it stayed, the reason it found him at all, and the realization settles heavy and quiet as the rain continues to fall around them. And for the first time since he left the road, Ethan understands that this night was never an accident. The shape becomes real the moment his eyes adjust, not all at once, but in fragments. A line of wet fur clinging to a narrow frame. The faint rise and fall of ribs that should not be this. Visible, the outline of a head resting low against the mud, as if even holding it up has become too much. And Ethan feels something in his chest tighten in a way that has nothing to do with the cold, because he knows this posture, knows the quiet way a body holds on when it has already gone too far to turn back easily. And he moves closer without thinking, each step slower than the last, deliberate, careful, the way you approach something that might slip away if you rush it. And the puppy is already there, pressed against the larger dog's side, its small body curved protectively as if trying to share warmth it does not have, letting out that same soft sound again, quieter now, almost like a whisper meant for only one listener. And the larger dog responds this time, not with movement at first, but with a subtle shift, a breath that deepens slightly, a faint tremor running through its body as awareness flickers just beneath the surface, and Ethan crouches beside them, one knee sinking into the mud, rain dripping from his hair, from his sleeves, from the edge of his jaw. But he does not notice any of it now, his focus narrowing to the dog in front of him, a German shepherd, older, its coat darkened by water and time, patches of fur matted down, not from neglect, but from endurance, from having stayed somewhere longer than it should have. And he exhales slowly, steadying himself before reaching out, his hand hovering for just a second before he lets it settle gently against the dog's side, feeling the warmth beneath the soaked fur, the fragile rhythm of breath that is still there, still fighting. And he nods once, almost to himself, as if confirming something he already knew. You are still here. And the words are barely audible, carried away almost immediately by the rain. But they are not meant to be heard, only to be felt, and the dog's ear twitches faintly at the sound. A small response, but enough, more than enough, and Ethan shifts slightly, adjusting his position to shield them from the worst of the rain, his body instinctively placing itself between them and the wind that threads through the trees. And that is when he sees it, not the dog itself, but what rests against its neck, partially hidden beneath the wet fur, a collar worn but intact, not the kind you find on strays, not improvised like the strip tied around the puppy, but something older, something deliberate. And his breath catches again, quieter this time, as he reaches carefully, fingers brushing the edge of the collar, tracing along it until they find the small metal plate attached. And he does not need to pull it closer, does not need to bring it into the light, because the shape alone is enough, the weight of it familiar in a way that settles deep in his chest. And for a moment he does not move at all, hand resting lightly against the collar, as if touching it too firmly might break whatever fragile thread is holding this moment together. And the rain continues to fall around them, steady and unrelenting, but it feels distant now, like something happening far away from where they sit. And Ethan swallows slowly, his other hand coming to rest near the puppy, steadying the smaller body as it presses closer to the larger one. Unwilling to leave, unwilling to step back even for a second, and that detail lands harder than anything else, because it is not fear that keeps the puppy here. It is something else, something that mirrors the same quiet refusal he sees in the older dog, a refusal to abandon, to give up, to walk away even when everything else says it would be easier. And Ethan closes his eyes for just a second, not long, just enough to feel the weight of that truth settle into him, because he recognizes it, not from tonight, not from this place, but from somewhere much farther back, from a time when leaving it felt like the only option and staying had cost more than he was ready to pay. And when he opens his eyes again, there's a shift in him, subtle but certain, like a line has been crossed without words, and he moves with more purpose now, sliding one arm carefully beneath the older dog's chest, testing the weight, feeling the resistance, the slight effort as the dog responds with a weak attempt to assist, and he nods again, softer this time. That is it, stay with me, and the puppy shifts immediately, adjusting its position as if understanding, staying close but giving just enough space for Ethan to move, its eyes never leaving his face, watching, measuring, trusting in a way that feels far too intentional for chance. And as Ethan prepares to lift, to carry, to commit fully to whatever this night has become, his gaze flicks once more to the collar, to the silent presence of something that ties this moment to something larger than he can yet see, and the thought settles. Quietly, firmly, this was never random. And as he begins to lift the dog gently from the cold ground, the weight settling into his arms, real and undeniable, he realizes that whatever brought him here did not just lead him to something that needed saving. It led him back to something he had not finished. The weight settles into his arms slowly, not heavy in the way a burden feels, but heavy in the way something meaningful does, something that carries more than just flesh and bone. And Ethan adjusts his grip instinctively, one arm supporting the chest, the other steadying the hind legs, careful not to jostle, careful not to rush, because he can feel how close this is to slipping away if handled wrong. And the older dog lets out a faint breath against his sleeve, warmer now, more present, and that alone is enough to keep him moving, one step at a time through the wet undergrowth, turning back toward where the road should be, even though he can no longer see it, guided more by instinct than sight, while the puppy stays tied against his side, matching his pace despite its unsteady legs, never drifting more than a foot away as if tethered by something invisible. And the rain continues to fall and steady, sheets soaking through everything until the world feels reduced to movement and breath and the sound of water hitting leaves. And for a while there's nothing else, no thoughts, no memories, just the rhythm of carrying and stepping and not letting go, until the edge of the trees finally breaks and the faint glow of his truck appears through the storm like something waiting exactly where it should be. And he exhales a breath he had not realized he was holding, pushing forward the last few yards, boots slipping slightly on the wet grass as he reaches the shoulder of the road and guides the older dog carefully into the back seat, easing it down onto the worn fabric, adjusting its position so its head rests higher, so it can breathe easier, and the puppy jumps in immediately after, curling itself against the larger body without hesitation, pressing close as if resuming a position it has held for hours, maybe longer. And Ethan pauses there for a second, one hand still resting lightly on the older dog's side, feeling the rise and fall of each breath, counting them without meaning to one, then another, steady enough to hold on to, and he nods once under his breath before pulling back and closing the door against the rain, circling quickly to the driver's side and climbing in, the cab filling with the sound of water hitting metal, the smell of wet earth and damp fur carried in with him. And for a moment he does not start the engine, does not move, just sits there with his hands resting on the steering wheel, breathing slowly as the weight of what just happened begins to settle into something more than instinct, something that demands to be understood, and his gaze drifts to the rearview mirror, catching the reflection of the back seat. The two forms press together, one small and alert, the other still and fragile but holding on, and his jaw tightens slightly as he reaches in his pocket, pulling out the dog tag again, the metal now warmer from his body, heavier than it should be, and he turns it in his fingers, finally allowing himself to look at it fully this time, to let the letters come into focus without turning away, and there it is, clear. Despite the wear, the name he had already known was there, Lucas Hale, and the sight of it lands differently now. Not like a shock, not like something breaking through, but like something settling into place, something that had been circling him for months finally finding its mark. And he leans back slightly in his seat, eyes fixed on the tag as the rain continues to fall outside, and the memory comes not as a flood but as a slow, deliberate return, a voice, a laugh, a promise made in passing. That never felt important at the time, the kind of thing men say to each other without thinking it will ever matter. And Ethan exhales slowly, his thumb brushing over the engraved letters as if confirming they are real, as if grounding himself in the fact that this is not something imagined. And his gaze lifts again to the mirror, to the puppy now watching him with that same steady focus. And for a second, it feels like the distance between then and now has collapsed into something small enough to hold in one hand, something he can no longer ignore. And he shakes his head slightly, more to himself than anything else, because this is not coincidence, not chance, not the kind of random moment you can walk away from and forget. And that realization settles into him with a quiet certainty, heavier than anything he carried through the trees, and he reaches forward, turning the key in the ignition, the engine coming to life with a low hum that cuts through the steady rhythm of the storm, and as the headlights flare against the rain, illuminating the empty road ahead, Ethan grips the wheel a little tighter, not from hesitation, but from resolve, because whatever this night has brought to him did not come by accident, and whatever is asking of him now is something he is no longer willing to leave unfinished. The truck rolls forward slowly at first, tires cutting through shallow water that gathers along the edges of the road, headlights stretching out into the storm like two narrow paths through something uncertain, and Ethan keeps both hands firm on the wheel, not because the road is difficult, but because his mind is no longer entirely here, not entirely in the present where the rain falls and the engine hums steady beneath him, but somewhere in between then and now, where memory does not ask permission before returning, and the name still sits in his chest like a weight that is shifted but not lifted. Lucas Hale. And he exhales through his nose, steady, controlled, the way he was taught when things threaten to move too fast. But this is different because this is not chaos, not urgency. This is something quieter, something that lingers. And his eyes flick once more to the rearview mirror, catching the reflection of the back seat. The older dog, still lying where he placed it, chest rising a little more evenly now, not strong, not steady enough to ignore, but present in a way that matters. And the puppy remains pressed close, head resting against the larger body, eyes open, watching everything, watching him, and there is something in that gaze that unsettles him in a way he cannot explain, not fear, not suspicion, but awareness, as if the animal understands, more than it should, as if it knows where this is going even before he does. And that thought stays with him as the miles begin to pass beneath the tires, the forest thinning gradually until the road opens up into a wider stretch, the faint outline of distant lights appearing far ahead through the rain, and Ethan shifts slightly in his seat, one hand leaving the wheel just long enough to reach back, fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the back seat, not touching the dog fully, just enough to feel the presence there, to confirm it is still real, still breathing, still holding on, and the response is immediate, a faint movement, a slight adjustment as the older dog leans subtly into that contact, and Ethan nods once, more to himself than anything else, stay with me, just a little longer, and the words come out low, almost lost beneath the sound of the engine, but they carry something with them, something he has not allowed himself to feel in a long time. Not hope exactly, but something close enough to it that he does not push it away, and the rain begins to ease slightly as they drive, not stopping but softening, the steady pounding against the windshield fading into something lighter, something that allows the world beyond the glass to come back into focus. The outlines of buildings, the glow of streetlights reflecting off wet pavement, the quiet signs of life returning after miles of nothing, and Ethan's jaw tightens slightly as he recognizes the turn ahead, a small road branching off toward a place he has not visited in months. Not because it was far, but because it carried too much with it. And for a second his hands hesitate on the wheel, the smallest pause, the kind that could go unnoticed if anyone else were watching. But there is no one else here, just him, the dogs, and the weight of a decision that feels like it has already been made somewhere deeper than thought. And the puppy shifts in the back seat again. Not restless, not anxious, just a subtle movement that draws his attention. And when he glances in the mirror again, those eyes are still there, steady, fixed on him, not asking, not urging, just present. And that is enough because he has seen that look before. Not in animals, but in men who trusted him to make the call when it mattered. And something in his chest settles with that recognition, something aligning in a way that removes the last bit of hesitation. And his hand tightens slightly on the wheel as he makes the turn, tires gliding over wet pavement onto the narrower road that leads away from the main stretch, toward a cluster of dim lights tucked behind a line of old trees. And the sign comes into view as they approach, barely illuminated, letters worn but still readable beneath the faint glow of a single flickering bulb. Hale Veterinary Clinic. And Ethan exhales slowly, the sound leaving him in a steady line as the realization settles fully into place. Not sudden, not surprising, but inevitable, as if this was always where the road was meant to lead. And he eases the truck into the gravel lot, the tires crunching softly as he brings it to a stop near the entrance. Engine idling for just a second longer before he reaches forward and turns the key, cutting the sound and leaving only the quiet patter of rain and the steady rhythm of breathing behind him. And he sits there for a moment, hands resting on the wheel, eyes fixed ahead, not because he is unsure, but because he understands now that this night is not just about getting here. It is about what happens when he steps out of this truck and walks back into something he once left behind. And as he finally reaches for the door handle, his other hand brushes briefly against his pocket where the dog tag rests, and the weight of it feels different now, not like a memory, but like a message that has finally been delivered. The door opens with a soft creak that feels louder than it should in the quiet of the lot. The rain now reduced to a steady drizzle that taps lightly against the roof of the truck as Ethan steps out, boots crunching against wet gravel. And for a second, he just stands there, looking at the building in front of him, the faint yellow light spilling from a single window near the entrance. The rest of the place dark, closed, resting, like it has nothing left to give to the night. And yet he knows better, because some places do not stop being what they are just because the hour is late. And he moves quickly then, circling to the back door, opening it with care as he reaches in to lift the older dog again, the weight settling into his arms, more familiar now, more certain. And the dog responds faintly, a small shift, a breath that carries just a little more strength than before, and Ethan nods once under his breath. That is it. Stay with me. While the puppy jumps down beside him, landing awkwardly but steady enough, immediately pressing close against his leg, as if refusing to let even a step separate them. And together they move toward the entrance, the dim light above the door, flickering slightly as he reaches it, his free hand pushing against the handle, and it resists at first, locked as expected, but he does not step back, does not turn away. Instead, he knocks once, firm but controlled, the sound echoing softly into the quiet building. And for a moment, there is nothing, just the faint hum of something electrical inside and the distant sound of rain, and then a shift, a light flickering on deeper inside, footsteps approaching slowly, measured, and Ethan feels his grip tightens slightly, not from strain, but from anticipation, because this is the moment where the night either continues forward or stops entirely, and the door opens just enough for a face to appear, older, lined with time, but steady, eyes sharp even in the dim light. And for a second neither of them speaks, the silence carrying something heavier than simple recognition. Because the man at the door sees more than just a soaked Marine standing there. He sees the dog in his arms, the puppy at his side, the reins still clinging to all of them. And something in his expression shifts immediately, professional instinct rising before questions, and the door opens wider without another word. "Come in," and Ethan does not hesitate, stepping inside quickly, the warmth of the room hitting him all at once, the smell of antiseptic and clean air cutting through the damp scent of the storm, and he moves toward the nearest table as directed, laying the older dog down carefully, hands steady despite the tension in his chest. And the puppy jumps up onto the edge of the table as well, staying close, watching every movement as if memorizing it, and the man moves in immediately, hands gentle but efficient, checking breath, checking response, his focus narrowing to the task without distraction, and Ethan steps back slightly, not far, just enough to give space, his eyes never leaving the scene in front of him, and for a moment the room fills only with quiet motion, the sound of controlled breathing, the faint rustle of fabric, the steady rhythm of someone who knows exactly what they're doing, and then the man pauses just briefly, his hand resting near the collar, his fingers brushing against the worn material before stilling completely. And the change is immediate, subtle, but undeniable. And he looks closer, not at the dog, but at what rests against its neck. And something in his posture shifts, the practice calm giving way to something more personal, something deeper. And Ethan feels it before he understands it, that same quiet pull, that same recognition that has followed him since the road. And the man exhales slowly, almost imperceptibly, before speaking, not to Ethan, not at first, but to the dog, his voice lower now, softer. "You held on," and the words carry a weight that does not belong to a stranger. And Ethan's chest tightens as he watches, the connection forming without explanation. And then the man looks up, eyes meeting Ethan's fully for the first time, and there is no question in them, only understanding, only something that has already reached its conclusion. "You found her." And the statement lands quietly, firmly, as if it has always been waiting to be said. And Ethan does not answer right away, because in that moment the truth settles fully into place, not as a surprise, not as a revelation, but as something inevitable, something that began the moment he stepped out into the rain and never gave him the option to walk away. And behind him the puppy lets out a small, steady sound, not fear, not uncertainty, but something closer to relief, as if the journey it began has finally reached the place it was meant to end. And Ethan exhales slowly, his gaze shifting between the man, the dog on the table, and the small figure pressed close beside it. And for the first time since the night began, the question that has followed him quietly through every step is replaced by something else entirely, something that feels less like doubt and more like purpose, because whatever this is, whatever brought them here, it was never just about saving a life. It was about finishing something that had been waiting far too long to be completed. The room settles into a quiet rhythm that feels almost sacred, the kind of stillness that does not come from silence, but from purpose, from hands that know what they are doing and a life that has not given up yet. And Ethan stands just off to the side, not pacing, not speaking, just watching, because there's nothing else he could do now except witness what he chose to step into. And the older man moves with calm precision, drawing the fur enough to see clearly, checking breathing again, adjusting the position slightly, each motion deliberate and unhurried, and the dog responds in small ways that matter more than anything loud ever could. A deeper inhale, a slight shift of the head, a faint opening of the eyes that does not fully focus but proves something vital is still there, and Ethan feels that change in his chest like a quiet release. Not relief exactly, but something close, something that allows his shoulders to lower just a fraction, and the puppy remains where it has been from the beginning, pressed close, its small body leaning into the larger one, watching every movement with that same unwavering attention. And at one point it lifts its head and lets out a soft sound, not distressed, not urgent, just present, as if reminding the room that it is still here, still part of this. And a man glances at it briefly, a flicker of something softer crossing his face before his focus returns to the dog on the table. And Ethan notices everything now. The way the room holds more than just action. It holds memory, history, something that stretches beyond this single moment. And his gaze drifts to the walls without meaning to the framed photographs that line a small section near the counter, images of dogs in different stages of life, some in training vests, some sitting proudly beside men in uniform, some simply looking at the camera with that same steady gaze he has come to recognize tonight. And one photo catches his attention more than the others, not because it is larger or placed differently, but because of the way it feels familiar before he even understands why. A younger version of the man standing beside him now, standing next to another man in uniform, both of them smiling in that quiet way men do when they have seen enough to know what matters. And at their feet a German shepherd sits, strong, alert, eyes forward, and Ethan's breath slows as he takes it in, the connection forming without words, and he reaches into his pocket almost without thinking, fingers brushing against the dog tag again, the weight of it no longer surprising but still significant. And when he looks back to the table, the man has paused again, one hand resting lightly against the dog's side, his expression no longer just focused but reflective, and he speaks again, quieter this time, almost as if the words are meant only for himself. "She waited longer than I thought she could." And Ethan feels that sentence settle into him differently than anything before because it confirms what he already sensed, what the night has been slowly revealing piece by piece, that this was not just survival, not just endurance, this was waiting, and waiting has intention, it has direction, it has a reason, and the puppy shifts again at that moment, moving slightly forward until its small head rests against the older dog's neck, right near the collar, right where everything seems to converge, and the man's eyes follow that movement, lingering there for a second longer than necessary, before he nods once, almost imperceptibly, as if acknowledging something unseen, something understood without explanation, and Ethan exhales slowly, his gaze moving between them all, the man, the dog, the puppy, and the realization deepens, not sharp, not overwhelming, but steady, like a truth that has finally settled into place, that this was never just about saving what was in front of him. It was about being brought back to something he left unfinished, something that did not end when he walked away, and now, standing here, watching breath return to something that refused to leave, he understands that redemption does not arrive loudly. It does not announce itself with certainty. It comes like this quiet, persistent, asking only that you stay, that you do not turn away this time. And as the older dog takes another deeper breath, its chest rising just a little stronger than before, the man finally looks up again, meeting Ethan's eyes with something that is no longer just understanding but gratitude. And though no words are spoken, the message is clear, not in what was said, but in what was done. And Ethan nods once in return, the motion small but steady, because for the first time in a long while, he is not carrying something alone. The rain has softened into something barely there by the time Ethan steps back outside, the door closing quietly behind him as the faint glow from the clinic window remains at his back, steady and warm against the night. And for a moment, he does not move, just stands there in the damp air, breathing in something that feels different now, not as heavy, not as sharp, as if the storm that brought him here has already done what it needed to do and is now retreating without ceremony. And he lifts his gaze slightly, looking out across the empty lot, the gravel dark with moisture, the trees beyond standing still in a way they had not been before, and the silence feels earned, not empty, but full of something quiet and settled. And he exhales slowly, one hand drifting almost unconsciously to his pocket, fingers brushing against the outline of the dog tag. And for the first time since he held it, the weight does not pull him backward. It holds him exactly where he is, grounded, present. And behind him, through the thin wall of the clinic, there is movement, life continuing in small, careful ways, the steady rhythm of hands that refuse to give up. And he closes his eyes briefly, not to escape, but to feel it, to let the moment settle into something he can carry without resistance. And when he opens them again, the door creaks softly as it opens behind him, and the older man steps out, not hurried, not uncertain, just calm in a way that comes from knowing the outcome before it is spoken, and Ethan turns slightly, meeting his gaze, and for a second there are no words, only the quiet exchange of understanding that has already passed between them inside, and then the man nods once, a small motion that carries more than any explanation could. She's going to make it, and the sentence lands gently, not as a surprise, not as a victory, but as something right, something that had been waiting to be true, and Ethan feels it move through him slowly, not rising, not crashing, just settling, like a breath he did not realize he had been holding, finally finding its way out. And he nods in return, the motion just as small, just as certain, and the man's gaze shifts briefly toward the truck, toward where the puppy now waits just inside the open door, its small figure visible against the dim interior, watching them both with that same steady awareness. And the man's expression softens again, almost imperceptibly, before he speaks once more, quieter this time. He never stopped believing she would find her way back, and Ethan's eyes narrow slightly, not in confusion, but in recognition, because he knows who he means without needing the name spoken again, and the space between them holds that understanding for a moment longer before the man steps back, giving him room, not asking, not directing, just allowing, and Ethan turns back toward the truck, boots crunching softly against the gravel as he approaches, and the puppy shifts immediately when he reaches the door, tail moving in a small, tired motion, not excitement, not relief, just something steady, something that mirrors the calm that has settled over everything else. And Ethan crouches slightly, his hand coming to rest gently against the small head, fingers moving through damp fur that is already beginning to dry, and the puppy leans into the touch without hesitation, as if it has been waiting for this too. And Ethan exhales slowly, his gaze lingering there for a second longer before he speaks, voice low, almost lost in the quiet of the night. You brought me here, and the words are not a question, not even a realization, just a simple acknowledgement of what has already happened, and the puppy does not move away, does not respond with anything more than that steady presence. And somehow that is enough, because not everything needs to be answered out loud, and Ethan straightens slowly, his hand lingering just a moment before he steps back, glancing once more toward the clinic, toward the light that still burns inside, and then back to the road beyond, stretching out into the dark. And for the first time since the night began, the path ahead does not feel like something to escape or endure. It feels open, unfinished in a way that does not weigh on him, but invites him forward. And he reaches into his pocket again, pulling out the dog tag one last time, turning it briefly in the dim light before closing his hand around it, not to hold on to the past, but to carry it differently. And as he slips it back in his pocket, he looks down at the puppy once more, the small life that refused to run, that chose to wait, that led him through rain and memory and silence back to something he had not known how to face. And he nods once more, to himself than anything else, before closing the truck door gently, the sound soft but final. And as he moves around to the driver's side, the night remains quiet, the storm now little more than a memory in the air, and the engine starts again with a low, steady hum, headlights cutting through the darkness ahead. And for a brief second, just before he pulls away, Ethan glances in the rearview mirror, catching the reflection of the puppy settling into the seat, eyes still open, still watching. And there is something in that gaze that lingers even as the truck begins to move, something that does not ask to be understood, only remembered, because some things are not sent to be explained, they're sent to be felt. And as the road stretches out in front of him once more, Ethan does not look back. Not because he's leaving something behind, but because he finally understands that some stories do not end when the storm passes. They begin in the quiet that follows, and sometimes the ones we think we save are the ones who lead us back to where we were meant to be all along in this deeply emotional journey. A battle-worn Marine encounters a crying German shepherd puppy in the middle of a relentless storm, setting off a chain of events that reveals a powerful story of loyalty, redemption, and quiet miracles. Among the most moving animal stories, this narrative follows how a single moment on a dark road leads the Marine into a hidden truth tied to his past, where a fragile puppy becomes a guide rather than a victim, leading him through rain, memory, and unresolved grief toward a dying mother dog who refused to give up. As one of the most compelling animal stories, it explores the unbreakable bond between humans and animals, showing how instinct, trust, and silent communication can carry meaning far beyond words. The Marine, once burdened by loss and unfinished promises, is forced to confront what he left behind, while the loyal German shepherds embody resilience, faith, and the quiet strength to wait for the right person to return. In a world where many animal stories focus on rescue alone, this story goes deeper, revealing how sometimes the one who rescues is also being saved, guided by something unseen yet undeniable. The emotional depth of this experience unfolds through cinematic detail, from the cold rain and empty roads to the warmth of a small veterinary clinic where truth and healing finally meet. As one of the most unforgettable animal stories, it highlights themes of second chances, spiritual connection, and the idea that not all encounters are random. Some are meant to lead us back to where we are needed most. The Marine and the German Shepherd do not just cross paths. They complete a journey that began long before that night, proving that loyalty does not end with absence, and that even the smallest act of compassion can restore something lost. Through this powerful addition to animal stories, viewers are reminded that grace often arrives quietly, carried on four paws, and that sometimes the greatest miracles are not the loudest, but the ones that bring two souls back into alignment. This is one of those rare animal stories that stays with you long after it ends, leaving behind a sense of peace, purpose, and the belief that no promise made with love is ever truly forgotten.